the distinguished invited guests, particularly the consultants and the resource persons that are gathered here. Good evening and welcome to this very important gathering, a retreat of the Honorable Ad Hoc Committee on Subsidy Regime. As you are all aware, even though it's just a one-day event, but the intent is to provide the enabling environment for the committee members and the consultants alike to brainstorm, build capacity and understanding on the task ahead of us. Let me quickly take you down the memory lane. As you are aware, the committee was established by the Honorable House to investigate the subsidy regime, petroleum subsidy regime between 2017 to 2021, and that the House relied on relevant sections of the Constitution, particularly Section 88 and 89, and as well as Section 14 of the Constitution that deals with the welfare of the citizens. The PIA, that was popularly known before as PIB, that was championed by the 9th House of Representatives, and now it yielded fruition and is an act of its own, enabled the NNPC or unbundle the NNPC to face the challenges of the future and equitably be able to deliver what is expected of it in the industry. The major question Nigerians ask is the issue of subsidy. That a lot has been said about it, how it happened, what goes around, what can be done about it. And I think in the wisdom of the 9th House of Representatives and the leadership, they feel there's no other time than now to be able to do something different and be able to tell Nigerians what goes around in the petroleum industry, particularly as it affects the subsidy. The consultants that are gathered here and the resource persons, I'm sure will do justice to the topics given to them, particularly on the way where we think the issue lies, what can be done to resolve the situation, and how we can handle the work effectively. I don't want to preempt what they will discuss, but particularly the mover of the motion hinged his argument or displeasure on particularly the DSDP, that's direct sales, direct purchase, and the attendant corrupt practice involved in the procedure. This House then is tasked with the responsibility of uncovering what happened and how we can effectively, curtail the situation and restore confidence of Nigerians on the whole process. The second issue is the effectiveness or otherwise. Do we continue with the subsidy? Is there a need? What are the challenges? So I'm sure all this, the consultants will do justice to it when they come to the fore. So I welcome you to the one-day retreat, and I hope we have a beautiful discussion, and I pray to the Almighty God that it should be a guide to this committee so that we'll be able to deliver a positive report to the House of Representatives and by extension to Nigeria. Thank you so very much.
We'll call on Mr. Fidelis of ABZ Integrated Limited to come forward for his presentation. We'll do it this way. Each and every resource person or a consultant will have 15 minutes to inform and pass his knowledge to the Honorable Committee. And later on, we'll have a question and answer sessions.
Yeah. Once again, Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the committee, my name is Fidelis Uzonwane. representing ABZ Integrated Limited. Well, let me first of all confess that I did not know that this retreat will be holding today. I was informed very late yesterday, and because of the respect I had to shelve any other thing that I had to do today to appear for this presentation. And that made me to have had a prepared presentation. I just have headlines that I will discuss, here, and I'll be prepared to take any question as far as whatever I say here is concerned. Well, everybody knows that recently, Nigeria's problem seems to have been subsidy. Television, radio stations, and every, public discourse talks of subsidy, as if there is no other thing that we have to do in this country. Subsidy ranging from, we were earlier told that subsidy in 2002 will be about 3 trillion. After a while, we were told that it can shoot up to 5 trillion, and recently 6 trillion. But let us ask ourselves, what exactly is the basis of this subsidy? Subsidy is that we import a petroleum product at a particular price or at a cost, which NNPC calls landing cost. And the petroleum product is sold at a controlled price of 162, 165. The landing cost, first of all, what is the landing cost? The landing cost has to do with what the exporter of petroleum product charges NNPC and other incidental charges before the petroleum product arrives at Nigerian shores, and other incidental costs. That is what NNPC calls landing cost. Pump price. Everybody knows what the pump price is. The official pump price, though, the official pump price is 162 naira per liter. In some places, 165. But the problem has been that nobody knows how much exactly is the cost of a petroleum product per liter. That is the landing cost. It has been shrouded in secrecy. And as persons who have been monitoring the goings on in this area, we have tried to find out exactly what it is, but it has been elusive. But again, from the documentations we have on NNPC's representations, it ranges between 130 to 200 naira per liter as of today, and the pump price, as I said earlier, is 165. So the problem of subsidy has been the manipulation of these figures, not being sure of what it is or what it should be. And that is why nobody is certain about what subsidy should be. And that is why we are greeted with 3 billion, 5 billion, and 6 billion. It's endless. Then the next issue that I want to talk about is the direct sale, direct purchase. Of course, this is the arrangement that NNPC introduced in 2016 to be able to give domestic crude to some marketers in exchange of petroleum products. Now, the problem here has been, how do you balance the value of the crude oil NNPC gives to the marketers importing a petrol and the value of petroleum products that comes into the country? That is exactly the main issue that we will suggest that the Honorable Committee takes time to look into it. How much crude does NNPC give to these marketers, and how much petroleum product do they bring in? Of course, if you don't use a common denominator, which is value, that is the dollars, you will always miss it. Then under this arrangement, you will see that NNPC takes domestic crude. They are allowed to take 445,000 barrels of crude a day to enable them provide for petroleum product for local consumption. We have seen that this allowance has not been monitored over the years. And then NPC has been allowed to just take anything it pleases. And not only that, it's restricted to that allocation of domestic crude. We have seen that based on certain records, where NNPC may take about 138 million barrels in a year, in some places he would now declare that, oh, he didn't take 138 million barrels to provide for this petroleum product. He took only 107 million barrels. These are the issues that the committee will look at based on the documents that NNPC will be required to submit to the committee. And this is the key. And this is where the elusive nature of the subsidy lies. What domestic crude that is taken and what petroleum product that is brought into the country. Then a third item is the implication of joint venture cost. I do not know how many people know that in 2017, Mr. President directed NNPC to stop the payment of joint venture cash call. But it looks as if they didn't want to obey that presidential directive, and they continue to pay. And that is the main issue with the subsidy, because attempt is being made to consume, to conceal the joint venture cash call being paid under subsidy. When the job progresses, we'll be able to tender some documents that will enable the committee members to look deeply into it, whether what NMPC is doing there is correct or not. In some cases, the payments may be made for joint venture cash call, but indicated as it was paid to FAC, which has been crying over the period that NMPC is not making enough remittances. Then the fourth item is non-remittances and under-remittances of domestic crude proceeds to FAC and illegal deductions and expenditures. Under this heading, NNPC takes this domestic crude and is required to pay the Naira equivalent to Federation account every month. But recently, it looks as if the subsidy has consumed what it should remit to the Federation account. And that is why in some months, it says there is nothing to remit. This is exactly where the committee should look deeply into. How much has NNPC remitted over the period of this subsidy regime, and how much were they supposed to have remitted? By the time we're able to distinguish or differentiate between what they should have remitted and what they remitted, we'll be getting a clearer view of what has caused this subsidy to be overbloated over the period. Then the fifth and the last item is the oil marketing companies. Everybody knows that NMC says is the sole importer of importer of petroleum products. But recently, it looks as if more people now know that NNPC is not the sole importer of petroleum products. If it's the sole importer of petroleum products, how do we have DSDP, direct sales, direct purchase? It only gives crude, and the marketing companies bring in petroleum products. So the oil marketing companies and their activities should be looked into. Already we are beginning to identify how they go about these things. Situations where because of the transshipment of petroleum products from the high seas, they say the mother vessel and the daughter vessel having to bring in the petroleum product from the high sea to the shores. Some of them don't actually get to the shores. They go elsewhere. And that is why there has been huge discrepancies in monthly volume of consumption. We have been able to track that, and at the appropriate time, we will be exposing the full details to the committee. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
We'll wait after the session, then the introduction can be done. And I would suggest that answers directed to a particular consultant. So go.
Thank you. On PMS subsidy payment and management by NNPC from 2017 to 2021. For decades, financing fuel subsidy in Nigeria has been as contentious as ever. This has also been a major source of industrial unrest, as the organized labor will, at any slight increase in petroleum price occasioned by government decision to remove or reduce association subsidy, take to street. Sorry, sir. Sorry, sir. Maybe you can increase the font. Maybe it's okay. We are sorry, sir. Government expenditure for subsidizing PMS, that's petrol, premium motor spirit, popularly known as petrol, due to its deleterious impact on the country's fiscal balance position, particularly the burgeoning debt profile. In addition, subsidy payment diverts scarce resources from priority sectors such as health, education, basic infrastructure from 667 billion in 2010. Oil subsidy has increased in zigzag manner to 1.43 trillion in 2021. And with worsening scenario that it may reach 6 trillion in 2022 on account of rising price of crude oil in the international market and depreciating value of exchange rate or local currency, among other factors. More specifically, in January, February, March, and April, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation (NNPC) has incurred 210.38 billion, 219.78 billion, 245.77 billion, and 271.58 billion, respectively, totaling 947.5 billion for the 4-month period in 2022. In May 2022, the NNPC informed the Federation Account Allocation Committee (FAC) that it would deduct as source a whopping sum of 874.5 billion meant for distribution in June 2022 to various tiers of government, which in terms under recovery. This will leave the federal government, the state and local government nearly cashless, as the only source of revenue to them will be non-oil revenue, which will hardly enough for financing of various government operations. The impact of this scenario will lead to poor financing of critical government projects, incidents, salary arrears, contractor debt, inability for the federal government to honor obligations to other key stakeholders in various sectors of the economy, where recoverable is necessary. We will design solutions to close the gap, leakages in PMS subsidy system. In the main, we as SVL on this assignment will conduct the following activity. 1. Hold meeting with all key players in PMS subsidy management and payment system. 2. Request and obtain records, data, files, bank statement, ledger, cash book, and all relevant financial records and documents through the committee summoned to the affected party to enable SVL and its associates have working material. Also, hold interview, discussion with relevant authority in the PMS subsidy management, including PMS marketers and dealers. Extract records, relevant data, figures necessary for various forensic analysis and evidence extraction. Apply both generic and non-generic forensic tools for analysis of data. Engage the committee at various times for purposes of interim briefing and or clarification of assignment focus. Produce a report of this assignment to the committee review and approval. Page 4. Determining, among others, assessment of oil subsidy management and performance of the Nigerian economy for the period under review. 2. Verification of the quantity of PMS imported by NNPC, other licensed importer, and the basis of determination of the quantity authorized for importation having regard to actual domestic consumption data. Also, verification of quantities of crude oil supply, refined as well as direct purchases. Evaluation of the subsidy payment system to determine possible sources of leakages, if any. Sorry, sir. Yes. If any, control the weaknesses in the system. Also, assessment of the role of agencies such as NNPC, CBN, MPA, FRS, Independent Marketer, Federal Ministry of Finance, Office of the Accountant General of the Federation. Verification of subsidy payment made from 2017 to 2021. Determine revenue losses through system leakages and recommend recovery strategy. Verification of non-payment of bridging costs from 2021 to Independent Petroleum Marketer and purported recent increase of 10 naira freight disbursement from interview granted to Independent Marketer, Suleja, who supplied to North Central State. Determine the continuity of subsidy payment after unveiling NNPC as a commercial venture and any other issue. Thank you for listening.
Honorable members of this committee, my fellow resource persons and consultants. My name is Dr. Abubakar Al-Ghali, and I'm from the academia, Base University to be precise. I lecture at the Department of Petroleum and Gas Engineering. First of all, I want to say a big thank you to the Speaker and the House leadership for this foresight, for this proactiveness in looking at the causes, the challenges, the solutions to this subsidy debacle. And it's important that we continue to brainstorm. No, it's not this one, please. This issue because of its impact on the economy. And actually, the title of my presentation is Fuel Subsidy in Nigeria, the Challenges and the Way Forward. Because I think what we should actually be interested in at this juncture, I think what we should be looking at is the solution. to this subsidy. Of course, everybody knows it is a problem, but what is the way out? And I'm actually going to talk about a bit of formula, which I think, if applied, that's right. Yes, a formula which I think, if properly applied, will actually help in looking at this problem. Because for me, one of the major problems where we have this unending, open-ended subsidy regime is because the main objectives of the subsidy is actually more or less, not achieved now. I wouldn't like to say, or to use the word defeated, but the fact of the matter is the subsidy regime was never meant to be open-ended. And today we have actually a situation where the regime is almost open-ended. So the objective of what I'm standing here to say is actually to have a sort of blueprint or a kind of method that will now kind of close this subsidy. Let us set a target of when we are stopping the subsidy instead of making it open-ended. Okay? So if it is open-ended, then it's not going to end, of course. So let us have a situation where we will say, okay, these are the targets, this is the timeline of this subsidy, and we want to finish it at so date OI. Because now we're actually hinging the stoppage of subsidy on fixing the refineries. And it's not happening. It's not happening. A lot of money keeps being pumped into these refineries, and it's not. They're not. The capacity is not achieved. So let us have a formula. Let us have a kind of blueprint. Let us have a target, a timeline to say this is when we want to stop this subsidy. So I'll actually start with some of the historical perspectives to this issue. As I said, the subsidy was never meant to be open-ended. And we know in the 70s, when it was introduced, the objective then was to say, okay, let us see how the government can cushion the effect of goods and services, because there was a sort of spike in inflation. And since we have this spike in inflation, it means goods and services can actually even go beyond the common man. So the government is looking at how it can cushion the effect, temporarily, not open-ended, as I said. So there was that continuous increase in subsidy, because, as I said, it was opened, and there was no deliberate attempt to actually set targets. The government needs to say, okay, when is this subsidy going to stop? That was not done. And not gaining capacity. So we cannot continue to say, okay, we'll actually stop subsidy when the refineries are fully, on. So that is why I was looking at a formula. I was looking at, a sort of, timeline or method, if you like, where we say, okay, we now attach removal of subsidy to upgrade of these refineries. I believe, as I said, the refineries are not on board, but then we have a bit of capacity. So it's a very simple formula, and it's saying that if you have 90%, if you have 10% capacity, okay, then apply 90% subsidy. If you have 10% capacity of the refineries, then apply 90% capacity. Okay? If you have 20%, then reduce it to 80% subsidy. If you have 30%, then reduce it to 70%. Like that. Okay? This is actually we now tie the removal of subsidy, the management of this subsidy, to the upgrade of these refineries until at a time, hopefully, when the refineries are 100%, then we can say, okay, there's not going to be any more subsidy. So essentially, the objective here is to, come out of that shell of, managing an open-ended subsidy, 21% inflation, rate of inflation at this moment. So what we're actually trying to say is 17.71%, take it, subtract it from 100%, that's about 82.29%, and apply 82.29% subsidy. If inflation reduces from 17.71% to, say, 10.35%, then look at the rate of that decrease. Look at the rate of that decrease. If it reduces by 5%, inflation reduces by 5%, then reduce subsidy by 5%. 175, 185, and this morning I bought 200 naira per liter. So I think there is also the need for, enhanced regulation. And thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, honorable members, for this opportunity.
I am Yusuf Ibrahim Abdul from MY Obaro and Co Consulting. I will start my presentation by telling a small story. When I was growing up, we used to have a river that we fish, and we use earthworm in the hook to catch big fish. But what we are doing today is like putting an elephant in a hook to catch fish. I don't know. I'm from Kogi State. I'm from Kogi State. Okuhapa. Okuhapa. Yes. It's Kogi. I am not from Igala extraction. I'm from Ibra extraction. Yes. And Okuhapa means a river behind houses. It's just flowing behind our house, and then we go there to fish. Now, the scenario I want to picture here is that in the crude, we have aviation fuel. In the crude, we have kerosene. In the crude, we have diesel. Have we been able to measure the crude you give, whether the equivalent of the cost built in the crude is given to you via PMS? This is where we will do our work. We want to know the commensurate benefit of crude that is given vis-a-vis the PMS you are giving to us. And some of these things, you don't need to overboard yourself with perhaps travels or so. Technology has helped us so much that you can know prices all over the world. How do you tell us that in Nigeria we consume so much of petrol? How do you tell us? Sir, in our report, we can give you the number of vehicles that fuel per day, and if possible, the quantity each of these cars will take. In our report, we will let Nigerians know whether it is better to do subsidy with petroleum or to do subsidy with yams and gari. For instance, if when I was traveling to Dubai, I filled my car. Nobody used it, my wife did not use it. I came back after 2 weeks. The fuel is still there. I used it for up to 1 week before it got finished. Eat today, distinguished member, and go to sleep thinking that the food will not finish. It will finish. You'll be hungry. It will work in your system and it will finish. This is a natural phenomenon. When you eat, it must finish. Whether you use it or you don't use it. Whether you go to sleep or you don't go to sleep. When you buy fuel, if you don't use it, it will remain there. Then why are you subsidizing it? Why are you subsidizing what will not finish if you don't use it? Now, we need to know the point of purchase. How much is it? What is the cost of their production in that country? We need to know the freight cost of bringing it into our Nigeria. We need to know for us to establish what is called landing cost. We don't know how much they are buying PMS from wherever they are buying from. You didn't give us evidence to see that this is actual cost of purchase. What you gave us is the quantity supply, and you sit down in your closet and fix price that this is the new cost because crude has increased. If crude is $200 per barrel, how does that translate to one aspect of the crude that we are buying from the international community? So, while I sympathize with the House because these people will fight back, it is better our operational mode is not even mentioned at all, so that we can sleep well. In 1998, we carried out investigation on toll gates. I handled Kotokarfi axis. And we discovered that 1% of what is being generated per day is not remitted to government. I think when Obasanjo came and saw the report, was very angry and said, demolish everything. And he now demolished every toll gate across the country. So I beg to say that this work, if it is holistically carried out, is going to help generation yet unborn. One single or very few individuals are benefiting fuel subsidy, not Nigerians. I must tell you that even if actual receipt is seen, how do you capture the fact that the fuel did not even land in Nigeria, or it simply passed through Nigeria to somewhere else? That is where the quantum of what we consume now come to play. Now, this work is a research work. It's a research work that will give us empirical evidence as to what we should do. And that should form the Ministry of Information and National Education Agency to convince Nigerians that we have lost so much in the past, and so we are no longer doing. In the year 2000, when MTN came into Nigeria and NITEL was regulated, I got my line in Lagos. We had to queue. That time we have international passport. I bought mine with 2,000 naira with Alcatel. 2 years later, Glo came in. MTN was doing per minute billing. Glo came with per second billing. MTN had no option than to follow suit. Today, you can get MTN line for 200 naira. No more ID card, no more international passport, no more queuing. Let me quickly add, by way of my submission, that including power, until we disallow the use of generators, the generator sellers will never allow you to do anything good in power. So the importers of petroleum will continue to give all languages to allow subsidy to continue and to create artificial hardship such that Nigerians will not withdraw from it. But by this report, if it is thoroughly done and it is well carried out to the public and to the populace, we are not supposed to subsidize anything. What is alleged we are consuming, we are not consuming it. Give me the number of cars in Nigeria that consume 1 million liters per day, and then I will give you the report of where the PMS is coming from. Thank you very much.
Where they refer to NNPC, is and that from the stakeholder that they will consult and sit down with. Believe if one look at the last speaker from Kogi, if you look at the presentation and with the SVL, I think if actually you want to achieve, we can follow. I don't think we can rely on SVL recommendation about consulting with NNPC. We won't get far because they become normal theoretical aspect that they become and brainwash that. But if you look at the practical example of what we received from the last speaker, in fact, he has really seen the truth in, because some of us are into this business, and that is actually what is happening. That is my observation. That's all.
Honorable Olododo, you see, the essence of this retreat is to avail us the opportunity to understand and build our capacity where necessary. Before now, I believe most of us must have gone on research to really find out what goes around in NNPC. The input given by the consultants is just an additional input, I believe. And then secondly, you know, some of them are here to showcase themselves, their ability, their capacity. I'm not so surprised that you are recommending somebody already from Kogi. Yeah, you have the right to do so, but I think at a better forum, not here, we discuss all the consultants, the resource persons, evaluate them, and see those that we can work with. Certainly, the SVL may not know the working of the National Assembly and committees. In fact, even if they are employed to work with us here, they are not to interact or interface with the NNPC. It's the committee that does so. It's whatever submission that is brought before us that we engage them to peruse and do their individual investigation, not the agency under investigation. That is not their purview. Honorable Gaza. All right. Honorable Hafiz.
I want to ask the first presenter. He spoke about landing costs. Mr. Felix Abi? Fidelis, sorry. You spoke about landing costs, and at the same time, you spoke about the cost of the pump price of the PMS. If I could recall, there was a time I saw a presentation by the Midstream and Downstream Authority, the CEO. He explained that there are some charges that are incorporated in this, from the landing costs to even some charges that the PEF, then the Petroleum Equalization Fund, add on the cost. And also, he also explained the PPRA template, based on the PPRA template. I don't know if you're aware about PPRA template. He said that was why at that time we had that price of about 165 per liter. He said, and that was why they used to pay that bridging gap, the fees of people that import this. So I want you to explain further on this. Yeah.
Beside yours, before my own. Our resource, that's Dr. Yusuf. There was this area you didn't capture when you were giving us that brief. That's talking about the cars or vehicles that use the PMS. So my colleague, honorable colleague was kind of talking about what about the generators? I mean, other auxiliary equipment that use PMS. Then from my own point of view here, I just want to provoke some sentiments that I want to appeal on behalf of the committee under that the consultants should please help us do further research or advise us on. Irrespective of what the outcome of our submission is going to be. Mr. Chairman, I don't know whether too soon this committee can have a report, that's temporary report, submitted that payment of this under recovery, which is the subsidy, should only be at the price, not at the port. Because as we speak today, it is evident that the pump price has been increased. Should we still be talking about the subsidy? So if we should talk about the subsidy, should it still be at the port? Whatever they tell us they have imported for us in Nigeria, or it should be at the pump, whatever Nigerians buy. I'm putting this to you, I'm not educating you, sirs, so that you can help us. So if it's going to be at the pump, can we set a limit that through the use of this our NIN, that is Nigeria ID card, if we set a limit of 5,000 or 10,000, so whatever is the difference, if the fuel is 165 naira or 195 naira as they are selling today, and the government is saying they have added to 20 naira on my behalf, it is only what I buy that the government should subsidize on, not what they presume that they have imported on behalf of Nigerians. How can you help us work on this and separate the two so that we can have something very tangible to present? That is one. By this motion, it's not limited to removal or continuous subsidy payment. We actually want to know, since 2017, is it justified? Yes or no? Then how much, in actual fact, have there been some kind of, what we should not say? And it's not an attempt to embarrass anyone or witch hunt. We want to know why we have been having these leakages, if any, and why we have not been making the savings. So all these, when at the end of the day, Nigerians are properly briefed, they will know that, okay, the government or individuals or some people weren't stealing the money. They were using it on our behalf. But if in actual fact, money was being mismanaged, or why, as it is, or as we think, then we re-engineer the whole thing. So those are the two areas I want the consultants to really help us. That is, should it be at the port or at the pump, even if we want to pay?
Consultants, all right. Honorable Mark.
To admonish us in terms of the deliverables, that I believe that we really want to see this to a logical conclusion. My brother Isiaka talked about the consultant being committed to the work they need to do, but I think we also need to encourage them, for them to know that we too want to actually get to the bottom of this issue. I think it's important to make that point. Very quickly, let me start to Dr. I don't know if it's doctor, but the APZ representative, Dr. Fidelis. Okay, A few things come to mind, if we can just note this down. Have you carried out any factual confirmation of that actual landing cost per liter? Because these are details we need to know. And from which climes do these importations of this product occur? Who are these people? How does NMPC identify and select who they import these products from? On what basis? These are avenues for corruption. Then it's very critical. We always hear them touting those numbers: 5,000 local consumption. What is the actual daily consumption in Nigeria? It's important for 5,000. Have you been able to get an idea of what that figure is? Because therein lies the issue. We're sending this out with a DSDP questionable strategy when there are byproducts from the refining of crude. Yes, a minimum of 13. So we all know that that is where value addition is in the crude oil business. So what has NMPC ensured that will be done? Are we just selling our country's future and Commonwealth just because of PMS? You know? Because you asked the question, which is what I want you to still help us answer. What do these people bring back? It's very critical for us to know the details, because then we'll start to hold NMPC responsible for that are accurate. Then, how does NMPC make these subsidy payments, and where do they make it from? This administration came in with the principle of TSA, but it appears as if this is constantly being flouted by NMPC. And Dr. Fidelis, you too can do some research in that regard, because these are critical areas you should be looking at. Where does NMPC pay this subsidy from? Which accounts? Are there escrow accounts even the National Assembly is not aware of? How do they make these payments? Do they run private accounts separate from the CBN's tracking? You also, sir. Where is it that we can get fuel from, if we have to, that is still going to be within what our people can pay for? And what is your opinion? Because I don't agree with your 90-10 approach. I think, and these are decisions we'll make, we should stop subsidy completely. That is my opinion. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. When we go to Dr. Yusuf, and I want you to note it. Fuel subsidy, could it be regarded as social contract? Dr. Yusuf, again, from your position, it seems that leaders must be decisive. Therefore, the position of responsibility is very, very important in this regard. Dr. Alkali, my question has to do with what is going to be the political implication if you decide to remove subsidy. Dr. Alkali, again, who is going to be at loss if this subsidy is finally removed? Mr. Fidelis, question to you, sir. Quantum of consumption, how do we reconcile it vis-a-vis with Auditor General reports? Vis-a-vis with Auditor General reports. SVL. My question is about federation accounts. Who's at lost? Is it local, state, or federal? Dr. Alikali, another final question as an academia is that with this situation we have found ourselves in this country, vis-a-vis the civil society organization, what's going to be your position if finally House of Reps or the National Assembly decide and take a position that subsidies should be removed? Thank you.
This crude oil given to NNPC on daily basis. I want to find out from the source person, because all the refineries of Port Harcourt, that's where and the Kaduna are down. We don't know what are they doing with it. And is it part of the subsidy? Thank you.
Honorable Avia Musag. I represent Just North Bassa Federal Constituency. Firstly, I want to laud the efforts put in place by our facilitators, and I believe as a committee we are being equipped enough to address the assignment that has been bestowed on us. I keenly listened to the presentation made by the representative, the SZP Integrated Limited. And as a time like this, I believe Nigerians are yearning, Nigerians are agitating for good governance. In the light of that, committee will be very, very happy to hear from you, sir, because your presentation, you did mention that in the period under review, that the allowances, being generated as a result of the subsidy has not been monitored for quite some time, and that while making that presentation as well, you did say that there has been under remittances to FAC as a result of consumption, by NNPC. So, what do we do at this very level? Because we are in dire need of solutions to this very problem. We'll be happy, like I said earlier, if you can enlighten us so that we'll know the necessary steps, to take in the course of handling this assignment. Thank you.
And the facilitators. I'm a bit concerned that as a layman who walks into this room to understand the problem of oil subsidy, there are certain things missing I had expected to pick up from the facilitators. One is to have the stakeholders administration list on everything bordering on oil subsidy. Who are the key players? If you walk into this room as a member of the House who is not maybe experienced in the oil and gas sector, I had expected the facilitators to stray. This is how it used to be before oil subsidy. This is what oil subsidy has been able to do. And the SWOT analysis of that, because it has not always been bad. There must be some strengths that we got from it, which should be highlighted, and the threats that it introduced. And if there are opportunities that it created. The consultant's supposed to reveal that for us to see. It's a policy of government that I will not sit here and agree that in its entirety it was wrong. It's a policy of government that was meant to block a gap. How far did it go in blocking this gap in the period within review? So I had expected a graph or a bar chart that will show us from this period to this period, this is what it used to be and what informed the oil subsidy. One. Secondly, this is the impact the oil subsidy has made in the economy of Nigeria before the ogive curve on this particular policy of government started going downhill. And it is at that point of going downhill that we'll be able to discover the indicators, point 1, point 2, point 3, of why we are not getting it right. Who are the role players within the stakeholders administration list that contributed to the downhill turn of a policy intended to build a nation? And how do we address it? It is by attacking those stakeholders where the weaknesses have been revealed that will help us either end it, review it, or redesign it. But to talk in a blanket form, so universal, that there is nothing specific that is being addressed and nothing specific that is being targeted, I must say, it's not so informing. So I will expect, Mr. Chairman, that in the work of the consultant, let them feed us with information that will help our report. We are not just going to write what they want us to write. We are going to write to the House based on critical analysis of what it used to be, the impact that the subsidy made, social impact analysis of the subsidy, the removal of it, and the consequential effect of such removal within our society. How do we plan to block the gap that is going to create if we lift it? Should it be done in phases? Should it be done suddenly? What is the best approach to be able to save our economy? Because if you tell me today that you will lift oil subsidy, 100% and allow the burden go fully on Nigerians in view of the economic realities currently, you might cause a crisis that we will not be able to manage with the money we are spending on oil subsidy. So I am asking us to have an analysis that is based on reality. So that is one. Another thing I want to mention, which I found out from the players in the field, is that we don't even have the capacity to accommodate the amount of products that subsidy that we are claiming we have used on oil and gas supposed to bring into the country. For example, if we say we are spending $1 million to bring in 1 million liters, the amount we have spent and for the quantity we have spent it for, we don't even have the capacity of storage to keep them in the country. When we talk about usage, let's talk about storage, because they don't just go from the international waters into the tanks of the users. Yeah, they are storing it virtually. You see what I'm saying? And that is a player. That person who is talking there now is a player in the industry. It's a player in the industry. You know, for him to say that it is stored virtually, it's not a hate speech. So the point I'm making, I want to summarize. The point I'm making is, we can't even justify the amount we are spending if we consider our capacity to hold the product for which we claim we have spent the money on. We don't have the capacity. Check the tank, the volume of tank farms in Nigeria and all the holding structures in Nigeria. We don't have it. And a player also told me that they go to London. Let me say this. A player who has benefited from oil subsidy said they go to London and they are trained by whoever on how to do documentation that will convince our government without any gap that the transaction has taken place. Whereas what took place is exchange of paper and the money of the federal government goes out. That is what we want to find out. Where were those papers submitted? What was in those papers? Did that transaction actually take place? I have also some people saying the documentation they did in Liberia, they did in London, that it has gone through, payment has been made, but no vessel came in. No actual vessel came in, no product came in. So those are the kind of things that we want to be able to find out to help us in making this analysis that will help Nigeria, not to penalize anybody, but to help Nigeria move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What is his name? Let me have his name. Honorable colleagues, please let us maintain one house. Honorable Henry, before the consultant responds to the numerous questions raised, you know, we had about 6 consultants and resource persons. We've taken only 4, while the other 2 were on their way.
Please, next slide. So I just tried to do 4 things, because the subsidy regime seems complicated, but it is not. It is actually just opaque. It is hidden. And it is the fact that light needs to be shed on it that will allow it to be visible and be profitable. So what I've tried to do is to look at the origin and the nature of subsidy, different subsidies all over the world, the Nigerian subsidy system, and cover this, which basically means where do we go from here. Next slide, please. So okay, so subsidy in Nigeria, I mean, basically, why we are here has to do with the fuel subsidy. And invariably, it has to do with, at least to the understanding of the average person, has to do with certain amounts that is being paid for a particular product that part of it goes to the government and all that. Subsidies comes in many different ways. And it can come in form of tax breaks. It can come in forms of direct payment and all that. But there is actually a lot of subsidy that goes in the industry, even to operators, which are not being recognized as subsidies. So the whole system itself is subsidized. The next slide. Origin and the very nature of subsidy, from the Latin word subsidium, which means support. And subsidy itself is a fundamental aspect of democracy. I say that because what actually differentiates democracy from the other forms of government, be it theocracy, be it communism and all that, is the free market enterprise. And in the free market, you actually allow the forces of demand and supply to actually meet each other. But over the centuries, they have found that if you leave economy to capitalist greed, the economy can actually collapse. And this was seen even at the origin of the petroleum industry with Standard Oil in the US, where they tried to hijack the US economy, and a lot of things were done. So basically, what subsidy just tries to do is actually to protect government. Because if you check now in Europe, they are getting towards crisis. And one of the crises, and there's a lot of rioting. There's rioting in Argentina already. There's rioting in Bolivia. There was riots in the UK. They're suspecting the riots will start anytime in India, and there are complaints in Germany and across. And if the Ukraine crisis gets to winter, a lot of the governments will not be able to come back. So what government basically do is that so that the economy itself does not come to bite them, they subsidize, and so that the people who are producing can actually get their worth, as well as the consumers who are there can actually also be able to the next slide, can actually also be able to buy, which is this. And there are all kinds of subsidies all over the world. There's export subsidy. And one of the people that do that the most is China. One of the reasons why Chinese goods are exceedingly cheap and like they're not competitive is that the government actually subsidizes it. So there was a paper mill that used to be in the old Niger state, which a few years ago, I think about 8 years ago, they tried to revive. But when they did the business plan and all the putting everything in place, they found out that the cost of producing the paper, the cost price was not up to half of what we were importing paper. So it's not like the Chinese are doing magic. It's also that they also do certain things to promote their economy. So over time, it came in as cheap products, but it was a strategy by government which they used to gain dominance. So there's also import subsidies where certain products are subsidized by government. There's employment subsidies. I mean, anybody who has lived abroad knows about that, where people who are not being paid get some kind of benefit from government, or small companies get some amount of money so that they can employ people. The whole idea is to keep people sane, safe, and so that they don't revolt. There's transportation subsidies. The EU, as of today, pays 73 billion euros on rail subsidies. So if you go to Europe and, for example, it costs 10 euro to get your ticket across the whole month, there's a reason why it's that cheap. It's a government strategy. There are energy subsidies everywhere. Even in the US, they do not subsidize petrol, but they subsidize drilling. The Americans subsidize drilling. They subsidize coal. Well, they tell us not to produce coal, but 40% of global electricity comes from coal, and they are from developed countries, but that's another issue. Of course, there are also agricultural subsidies. Why are foods from the Western world very cheap? They are subsidized. American wheat, all those things, they are subsidized, and they are heavily subsidized as well. So, like I said, the US government heavily subsidized domestic agriculture. It subsidized oil and energy products. They subsidize housing and healthcare, which you find in things like Medicare. Next slide. So the issue will now be, what is the issue with the Nigerian subsidy system? So the subsidy, as a matter of principle, is not totally wrong. It is an aberrant to economic principles, but the intent, the intention is not totally wrong. So when you have something that as a matter of principle can be right and is bringing the wrong results, then whatever it is that are discovered there. Next slide. So, like I said, the devil is in the details. Basically, the refineries that are involved in the DSDP is most probably they are not part of any cartel. Let them come. They will say what they know. The transportation companies that are involved, let them come. They will say what they know. NNPC should be made to give a list of all the companies that are involved in DSDP officially, so that in the event where other companies are discovered, then you can claim that NNPC has deceived the parliament. Then each company, and I mean, all those companies, they should also come with their offer letters, because they actually give them an offer letter. And each DSDP company is associated with an international firm. Like Trafigura, there's a company that partners with them and all that. So all those things, the foreign partners, the foreign banks, everybody should be invited, and invited through their embassies. And of course, at the end of the day, it's going to be very, very, very difficult for anything to be hidden. Thank you. So my favorite slide says that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Thank you very much.
Very effective presentation, very highly incentive. And I'm sure are well informed and they are ready to go to work. Honorable Appel, nothing to present. All right. So, honorable colleagues, I think we now go to get the response of the consultants for the questions raised. Okay, you want to ask something?
Tuned to be part of one issue that happened with NNPC. Most of these companies, if you discuss with them, NNPC, after shortlisting them, it's not all of them that have the opportunity to lift the crude. You find out that some of the companies only lifted once throughout the year. Some would not even have the opportunity to be programmed. Yeah. because of that, yeah, you know the issue. So many companies have come and protested that NMPC have not been fair to them. They only shortlist them, but they don't give them. So they select based on their favorable ones and give them to lift. This is what I want to add.
Mr. Chairman, the consultants, with your permission, we will take them the way they make presentation.
Yes.
Fidelis Uzawane, representing ABZ Integrated Limited. Let me address the questions as I was able to pick them. The first one I picked was, from which account does NNPC make these subsidy payments? Well, before 2016, I think there was adherence to the normal government accounting procedures that all earnings were paid into the federation account and disbursements were made accordingly. But after 2016, things changed, especially on the introduction of the DSGP, where monies were no longer paid into the federation account as expected before disbursements are made. So it's very difficult within the relevant period, that is 2017 to 2021, which your investigation covers, to say that you can appoint at any account where subsidy is being paid from. That is one. Another question has to do with quantum of consumption. How do we reconcile it with yes, before 2016, it was easy to track the accounts from which a subsidy was being paid. But from 2016, things changed, especially on the introduction of the direct sales, direct purchase. That's my point. So it's not easy to identify a particular account, except NMPC provides one. Then quantum of consumption. How do we reconcile it with Auditor General's report? Unfortunately, I'm not privy to the Auditor General's report. But quantum of consumption, I think we have had opportunity of working deeply into what it is. And based on NNPC's official documents, you can easily establish how much PMS we consume in this country every day. It's easy, but the difficult thing is to have access to those records. But we are fortunate to have them, and at the appropriate time, we will display them to the committee. The next one is crude oil given to NNPC on daily basis. Is this the subsidy? Well, that is part of the basis of the subsidy. When they take the 445,000 barrels, they are entitled to it. But I must confess that in recent times, they may not have been taking that precisely. The problem has been the infusion of other sources of crude into what they use to fund to administer the direct sales, direct purchase arrangement. It keeps on changing. And you have to be something else to be able to track the exact transactions and spot them. Take for instance, if in a period you see NNPC making a report to FAC in a month about the petroleum product imports, you indicate that these are the vessels that brought in the products. But you don't indicate the oil companies, the marketing companies that brought in the product. It tells you that there is something wrong. And these are the issues that will be addressed during the investigation. So, okay. I think that is virtually what I recorded. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
First and foremost, I want to thank Mr. Shoumi. He has answered most of the questions raised by the committee member. However, the assignment given to us on the payment of subsidy should be at pump station, not at the port. We'll look at that and see what we can do. But we need to agree that there's no transparency, there's no accountability. Right from the conception of the petroleum production, import, distribution to the pump price. The last speaker said something about the pricing of the subsidy. And there's a question asked about this, the removal or non-removal of subsidy. Our position will be that the House have the mandate of the people they are representing to invite all the stakeholders involved in petroleum production, distribution, transportation, and selling to explain to the House how these things are being done. We discovered that, like one of the speakers said, that we try to do this. Many of us, including the honorable members too, they are not safe. But you have the mandate to invite all these people. Let Nigeria knows what and what has gone wrong. Also, we will encourage that the honorable members, we encourage modular processing of our crude, which, in our opinion, will help in employment, reduce the costs of petroleum production, and sales to our people. Also, as regards the source of our information, to the figure quoted in our presentation, is from IMF report and World Bank report. Also, there was a question about the SWOT analysis as regards petroleum subsidy. Yes, we all agree that there's a global recession, and recently the war that is going on in Ukraine versus Russia, which has an effect on the global petroleum price, also come to Nigeria. The non-accountability, non-transparency by relevant stakeholders. We look at what it's been before, now, and after, if we are to or not to remove the subsidy. And how do we attack the storage versus usage of petroleum? Yes, it's difficult for now to know exactly the quantity of our importation vis-a-vis storage because of what we are talking about, lack of transparency. Thank you very much, sir.
Ali once again. And on the first question, where the honorable member from Benue State, I'm sorry, sir, I couldn't catch your name. Yes, thank you. He said, where do we get the fuel from? And also, he has issues with my formula of 90-10, as he stated. Well, yeah, we simply don't have this refined fuel. So where we get it from is to buy it, as simple as that. Our refineries are not working. You get fuel when you pay for it. But the only problem here is that, you see, where Nigeria's situation is peculiar is that we are an oil-producing nation, and actually the 6th largest oil-producing nation in the world. Yet, we cannot, supply, we cannot satisfy even domestic consumption of refined products, and we have these refineries as well. So we have to pay for it. That's the answer to the question. However, on the direct sales, direct purchase agreement, I think this is also one method that can be applied to the IOCs, the international oil companies. Yes, why not? There is also a counterpart funding for NNPC, which we can actually use instead of this counterpart funding for NNPC. Why don't we say, okay, we apply trade by barter system, which was actually invoked in the early 80s. Why don't we give them crude? That's the international oil companies, because they can guarantee you products, no doubt about that. But the domestic, the local marketers cannot. So why don't we use this, apply this DSDPO, trade by barter, to IOCs, to international companies? That may even give us more options to get this product. So he said he doesn't agree with my 90-10. Yes, I can understand. Obviously, there are things that I have explained in that 90-10 formula, which I didn't have time to. Obviously, if you use the formula, there will be fluctuations in the price of products. There will be fluctuations, because it means if refineries are 10% capacity and you apply 90%, and tomorrow they are 20% capacity and you apply 80%, it means the prices will fluctuate. And that is why I call for proper regulation. But the point here is that, you see, you cannot have refineries, because once in a while we are told that refineries are working. You cannot have refineries maybe 25% capacity and then you pay 100% subsidy. You pay 100% subsidy. When refineries are actually giving you something, you have to look at what they are giving you and then subtract it and apply accordingly on the subsidy. Then there is also the honorable member who said political implication. Of course, there will be political implication. Actually, if you remove subsidy today, to be honest, you're actually endangering the system, because there is even the risk of revolt from people, because already people are squeezed economically. So I have never said that subsidies should be removed at one go. No, because there will obviously be, and that's why in my presentation I advocated a phased approach. Actually, I am advocating that the committee should recommend. I'm recommending to the committee to recommend a 10-year first subsidy removal. 10 years, over 10 years, over a period of 10 years. Also, the honorable member said who will be at loss? Of course, the public, the Nigerian public will be at loss because there will be inflation if some subsidy is removed. And that is why Mr. President was spot on when he said he was not going to remove subsidy, even as IMF and World Bank have advised so, because of the implications here. The implications on the common man, transportation. Almost everything is tied to transportation. So you can actually not remove subsidy at once. Well, he also asked me my position on removal of subsidy. Well, my position is simple and very clear, and which is that I don't support a one-off removal of subsidy at this point, but I support a phased approach that will cushion the effect of that removal on demand on the streets. Yes. And then also, Honorable Member Dan Kalu spoke of a SWOT analysis. Of course, I agree that my colleague, the consultant, has answered appropriately. You cannot do a SWOT when you don't have the right figures, when you don't do a mingle figure. But he said, what are the positives and the negatives, which was really good. We have to look at the some of these positives that because it's not all negative. Well, the positive is that it has kept the government afloat. It has kept government afloat. You can imagine if there are no subsidies and if a liter of oil is 500, there will be even a possible mass action. It has kept government afloat. It has kept inflation, at some level, though not a very good level. It at least has kept some of us, being able to send our kids to school. And the negatives, of course, there is actually a conduit pipe, more or less a conduit pipe, to siphon money. We just heard recently that about 10 billion, couldn't be traced within months. One of my colleagues just said about 9.64 billion, in the first 3 months of this. So this is a conduit pipe. There actually are no records. There are no procedures, and you can't really establish even how much has been spent and how many liters have been paid for. So it's a conduit pipe, and that's also, it has in a way made us lazy to fix our refineries. It has made us lazy to fix our refineries because we feel, it's something easier to do. Just sit down and get the fuel, and some people make money, and that's the end of it. Thank you very much.
The question that was directed to me was based on whether fuel subsidy.
You see, no, before I want the attention of
as to whether fuel subsidy is a social contract. It is. As a matter of fact, it's a welfare arrangement for the populace. Because the product is gotten from Nigeria. It's a blessing to Nigerians. So, and we are not supposed to be, shortchanged in it. I want to plead with the House to do two things. One, get the report of what is actually happening. We are all speculating here. What if we are paying so much wrongly for subsidy? Do we still cancel subsidy? The answer is no. What if what we are paying is right? Do we still cancel the subsidy? The answer is still no. The economy of this country and the resource of this country belongs to Nigerians. And so if we have good character in treating the welfare arrangement of government to people, then there is no need cancelling it. The story of the toll gate I gave is like throwing the baby with the bathwater. That the purpose of toll gate was to repair, to put this money in an escrow account to fix the roads. But because one person hold on to the toll gates and is not emitting even 90%, even 10% of what they're generating on the roads. And when President Obasanjo came, he said no, he will not allow it, and then he bulldozed all the toll gates around the country. That should not happen also here. If we say cancel subsidy, what is our fact? What have we found out? The subsidy regime, wrongly or rightly, permit us to investigate, carry out a holistic research as to whether what we are consuming is true, as to whether the price given to Nigeria is true, as to whether what is entering Nigeria is passing through Nigeria to another country, as to whether we are paying for paper alone without product. This will help in your policy formulation as to whether subsidy regime should be cancelled or not. I am not in support of cancellation of subsidy regime. Mr. Bayo simply analyzed it here. Agriculture has subsidy, energy has subsidy, so we should also have subsidy. But are we having the same mindset to build the nation for tomorrow, or we are building the nations of our stomachs? Because those nations are building their nation for tomorrow, and that is why they are subsidizing so much to suffocate the third world country. So if we are also going to follow that pattern, then there must be integrity in what we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much.
What is fuel subsidy? And I have an elastic thought on it. And I said to myself that will there not be an unconstitutional position to take when in the Constitution it has been specifically mentioned that there shall be an established federation account for such. Why do you want to create another dedicated account for that purpose? Thank you.
Thing to realize is about the fact that laws are made for man and not man for the laws.
You're speaking to yourself.
Okay. I think the first thing we need to realize is that the laws are made for man and not man for laws. The first thing is that what do we want to achieve? The whole idea is that we just want the subsidy regime to be transparent. And one of the ways that it can easily be transparent is if there's a dedicated account to it. So on the basis of that, it can form part of the submissions of the report. The modalities for how it will be affected is a different thing. What is important to note is that the subsidy accounts or the subsidy payments have not been audited. Nobody really knows how much is spent, to whom it is spent. I mean, for example, DSDB is basically trade by barter. And the crude is not from our normal production volumes. So the crude that goes there costs some amount of money. What happens to it? Because we are paying for what comes out here. So we may as well have been buying crude, but we actually send crude there. So it's supposed to be in the accounting process because actually, whatever it is that we are paying two times. First, in terms of the crude that goes, and then the finished product. There's a whole lot of things to look into. So as the committee begins to demand accounts, you will see that there will be resistance. Even the CBN, we need to provide funds because the people who need to send funds abroad need to go through CBN to make sure those funds go abroad. So there must be a need to demand the accounting even from the CBN. And it is because what we are talking about is percentage of the national budget. And we believe it is money that goes into private hands rather than public hands. So I think it's not so much what the law says per se, it's so much what we want to achieve. Do you want to get to the root of the matter? That should be the question.
With traders, then those who ordinarily supposed to have refineries. But in practical terms, the crude are taken and given out to this consortium, and in exchange, they bring in PMS of equivalent value. You are right, supposed value. So where the subsidy comes in now is, if for the 950,000 barrels of crude taken out, and in the agreement, note that for every lifting of the crude, every allocation, an agreement is signed of the equivalent quantity of PMS to bring in. Quantity. Now, the value now depends on the day, either the day of bill of lading or on the day you arrive with the product, because once you arrive with the product as the supplier, the first thing you must do is to give your notice of arrival, of readiness. And there are two pricing systems, either the spot, the prompt, or they use the differential. It depends what is in your agreement. So the prompt is what is the ruling market price as at that day you are bringing. And the prices is determined by the Global Energy Platform, PLATS. So you don't fix it, neither do Carlo fix it. So there is a regulated price of crude, of PMS, each day. So the issue here now, if the product for the 5 million naira crude you took, and they brought in the value of that PMS on that day, let's say is 6 million naira. Forget about the difference. The reconciliation are always done between NMPC and the supplier. But the issue now is 6 million naira. That is the price. NMPC got that. But because of the government policy, So with that 6 million, it means per liter, it arrived, for argument's sake, it arrived at 100 naira. But because of the government policy of not selling at that price, selling at a lower price, you have to now sell, like now, is 145. I mean the official before now. The product lands at almost 200. So now you have to sell at 145. So Mr. Chairman, the difference there is that 55 naira. The difference between the cost at which NNPC received the PMS and the price they are selling to marketers as per government policy. And if you watch, in the budget you passed, it's not captured as subsidy, it's under recovery. So is that loss they suffer is under recovery. And that is why you now provided in the budget. Now, to the federation account, there's no account, and there's no account that can be opened for now for subsidy payment. Even in NNPC, there is none. What happens is, if they calculate that loss they suffer from the price they received and the price they are selling to marketers, now they deduct it from how much they were supposed to remit into the federation account and pay you the balance. So every year in the budget, in the revenue profile side, schedule, you will see how much, you will get the accountant general, they will provide you the records of the fact. You will see how much they deduct each month for the subsidy payment. So that's why it's called under recovery. So there's no actual payment in the real sense. So ordinarily, the 445,000 barrels, NNPC is supposed to pay into the federation account. But they don't pay because when they get the equivalent in PMS, they now calculate the loss they suffer and deduct it from how much they were supposed to pay you for the 445 and not pay the balance. Before now, they were doing that at FAC level. That's why the states rose against it and said, no, this deduction you are doing is affecting our shares. Federal government should take the responsibility and bear. So that's why they transferred it back to you as a legislature, as the parliament, to now include it in the budget. So that if there's no money, loan can be borrowed in the name of the federal government. So in getting to the root of this, it's very simple. No matter how hard they try. Is chairman, you request for the record of all the PMS inflow from every source. You can be able to establish the quantity that was brought in 2021. For every supply that is done, Mr. Chairman, an invoice is issued by the supplier. And that quantity and vigor is not only available to NNPC, the DPR has it, the Navy has it, the Custom has it. So that price at which is landing, the MPA has it, who provides the shipping services.
Insider consultant. Yeah. So I'm so happy that the House, in its wisdom, was able to set up two other committees. The other committee to establish the actual consumption of PMS in the country, and the other one on the refineries. Our sole mandate is to check out what the subsidy is all about, expose corruption, and make recommendation on the effectiveness or otherwise of subsidy in Nigeria. Yeah. So whether it's necessary or not, honorable colleagues, I'm sure we are informed by the vast experience of the consultant and resource persons that have made presentation before us, and I'm sure it must have added value to what we already have. Basically, from summing up from all the presentation, we can proceed that the major area of concern are issues that have to do with non-remittance, the DSDP, non-remittance of taxes to the Federal Revenue Service, the royalty and whatever, because the NNPC suddenly reversed their the statutory or traditional accounting method of cash method to accrual method to enable them spend taxes that are supposed to be remitted to the Federal Revenue Service and the royalty that are supposed to be remitted to the Department of Petroleum Resources. Then the issue of DSDP, well enumerated, I think discussed. There are attendant issues that were silent, particularly when you look at the quantity of crude given and the quantity of refined product taken, then what happened to the byproduct? That often, yes, windows of, search and investigation. Then we have to look at the audited accounts of the NNPC itself. And that's why we have financial consultants that are well versed to be able to x-ray the account to the extent of reaching out to wherever, including foreign banks, to see how we can get to the root of the matter. Discrepancy on the landing cost and the pump price of petroleum, yes, that has been discussed. If there are, a low landing cost price, for example, 128 or 133 naira, the attendant consequentials added to maybe 150, and then the pump price is 165, then why do we have why do we need the subsidy? It is those are some of the silent questions that we have to dig in and find out why we're even wasting the money. So, yeah. So, honorable colleagues, about 60 stakeholders that are involved in one way or the other with issues relating to subsidy have been invited by this committee. And if we're able to get approval from the speaker, tomorrow we are going to inaugurate this committee and the investigative hearing will commence. I want to particularly state here that this committee will not waste time. We have the necessary documents and we can find it through other windows. And I think by way of balance that we invite those concerned to appear before this committee, at least to defend some of the issues raised against them. Non-appearance will not delay the work of this committee. There's no how we can continue doing the same thing all the time with no result. There must be a paradigm shift. We're all out to do our best to expose corruption where it is, strengthen and shape this policy of subsidy, if at all it has to continue, and if we maybe have to revisit the whole policy generally, as maybe advised or suggested by one of the research persons from the academia, yes, there could be a phased removal of subsidy. That remains the prerogative of this committee now to decide the way out. But what is the most important aspect here is how do we reinvest the subsidy? If we are able to make savings, or if we are able to remove it in place, what do you now use the money to do to, provide the necessary palliatives, maybe in transportation, in social welfare, and any other, intervention that the government may do to lessen the impact, going by the fear raised by some of the discussants in in the retreat. So, honorable colleagues, we are going to have a brief executive session to discuss some of the issues raised there and some, particularly the scheme, the program of work. Is that program of work? No, a work plan. Sorry, yes, the work plan. Because already from the responses of some of the stakeholders, some of them are not ready and they are raising excuses and they wanted a time shift. So thank you so very much, particularly the resource persons for finding time to be here. You have made our day. If there's, in the absence of any question of deviation or issue from the honorable colleagues, I can excuse you so that we can have the executive session and then we move on.